The morning air was cold and heavy, the kind that made people pull their coats tighter and walk faster without looking around. On a narrow street filled with noise, food smells, and rushing footsteps, a young woman stood still as if she did not belong to the movement of the city. Beside her stood her mother, thin and tired, holding onto her arm for balance. The mother's breathing was slow and uneven, and every few seconds she had to pause, as if the strength to stand was leaving her little by little. The young woman had been on this street many times before, never like this. Today, she was not just passing through. Today, she had come with a purpose that made her chest feel tight and her stomach hurt. She kept looking down the road, watching people walk past without noticing her. Some were laughing into their phones, some were arguing, some were lost in their own worries. No one knew what it had taken for her to stand here. Her mother had once been strong. Once, she had worked long hours, cleaned other people's homes, cooked meals late into the night, and still found the energy to sing softly while folding clothes. That voice had filled their small room with warmth when they had nothing else. But time had not been kind. Illness came quietly, first as small pains, then as days when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. The doctor visits became fewer because money became thinner. Soon, even food felt like a choice they had to think twice about. The young woman had tried everything she could think of. She worked long shifts, took small jobs that paid little, and skipped meals so her mother could eat. She smiled when she was breaking inside. She told herself that things would get better if she just tried harder. But trying harder did not stop the eviction notice from sliding under their door. It did not stop the medicine bottles from becoming empty. It did not stop the fear that grew every night when she listened to her mother cough in the dark. That was when she remembered the musician. He played on this street almost every day. People said his music could make even the busiest person stop and listen. Some said he used to perform on big stages long ago. Others said he had chosen the street because he liked being close to real people. No one seemed to know the full story, but everyone knew the sound of his instrument. It carried through the air, soft but powerful, like it was speaking directly to the heart. She had watched him from a distance before. She had seen people drop money into his case, smile, and walk away lighter than before. She had seen him close his eyes when he played, as if the world around him disappeared. In her darkest moments, she wondered what it would be like if her mother could hear that music even once. Maybe it would remind her of who she used to be. Maybe it would give her comfort, even if it changed nothing else. Now they were here, standing only a few steps away from where he usually played. He was there already, sitting on a small stool, his instrument resting on his knee. His clothes were simple, worn but clean. His hands looked rough, like hands that had worked hard for many years. When he played, the noise of the street seemed to fade, and even the cars sounded distant. The young woman felt her legs shake. She told herself to move forward, but fear held her back. What she was about to do felt wrong and shameful, yet it also felt like the only choice left. She looked at her mother, who was staring at the ground, unaware of the thoughts racing through her daughter's mind. The mother trusted her completely. That trust made the decision even heavier. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. The music slowed and then stopped. The musician opened his eyes and looked up at her. His gaze was calm, not surprised or annoyed. He had seen many faces over the years, many stories written in tired eyes. Still, he waited, giving her space to speak. For a moment, no words came out. Her throat felt dry, and her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. People around them began to notice the pause. A few stopped walking. Someone whispered. The street seemed to hold its breath. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice low and uneven. "I don't want to interrupt," gave a small nod telling her it was all right. She swallowed and continued. "My mother is very sick. She hasn't heard music in a long time. I heard you play, and I thought maybe you could play one song for her. That alone would not have been strange." Many people asked him for songs, but the look on her face told him there was more. "I don't have money," she added quickly, almost in a rush. "Not enough, at least. But I can work. I can clean, carry things, do anything you need. I'll come here every day if you want. I'll do whatever it takes." Her hands were shaking now. She felt the eyes of the people around her, felt their curiosity and their judgment. She lowered her voice even more, as if trying to hide the next words from the world. "If that's still not enough," she said, barely above a whisper, "I'll give up everything I have. Even my own future. I just want my mother to hear a song. Just one." There was a long silence. The musician did not answer right away. He looked past her at the older woman standing quietly by her side. The mother lifted her head slightly, sensing the attention, but said nothing. Her eyes were tired, yet gentle, filled with a kind of patience that only comes from a life of sacrifice. The crowd grew uncomfortable. Some people shifted their weight. Others looked away, pretending not to listen, though they heard every word. A few thought the young woman had gone too far. A few felt their chests tighten, remembering their own parents, their own fears. The young woman felt tears burn behind her eyes. She was sure she had embarrassed herself. She was sure she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. But she did not step back. She could not. "I'm not asking for pity," she said softly. I don't know what else to do." The musician finally spoke. "One song," he said, his voice steady and clear. Hope rushed through her so suddenly it almost hurt. She nodded quickly. "Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. I swear I'll repay you somehow." He raised a hand gently, stopping her words. "I didn't say the price yet," he said. Her heart dropped again. She braced herself, ready to hear something she could not give. "Just $1, he said. She stared at him, unsure she had heard correctly. Around them, people exchanged confused looks. $1 was nothing. It was less than what many spent without thinking. Yet for her, even that small amount felt impossible. I don't think I have even that," she said honestly, her voice breaking. He smiled, not in a mocking way, but with a warmth that eased the tension in the air. "Look again," he said gently. She searched her pockets with trembling fingers. At the bottom of her bag, she felt a small coin. She pulled it out, hardly daring to hope. It was a single dollar, old and worn, the last of what she had saved without even realizing it. Her hands shook as she held it out. For a moment she hesitated. Giving this away meant having nothing at all. But she looked at her mother and knew there was no real choice. She placed the dollar into the musician's case. The sound it made as it landed seemed louder than it should have been, clear, final. The musician closed his eyes, lifted his instrument, and prepared to play. The street fell quiet once more, as if something important was about to begin. And though no one realized it yet, that single dollar had already started to change everything. The musician lifted his instrument, and the young woman could feel her heart beating in her throat. Her mother leaned slightly on her, still pale but alert, sensing the importance of the moment. The street, filled with the usual noise of cars, voices, and distant shouts, seemed to fade away, replaced by a quiet tension that held everyone around them. Passers-by slowed, sensing something different, though none could have guessed just how much weight was resting on this single song. The musician's hands rested lightly on the strings. For a moment, he did nothing, letting the silence stretch long enough for the people nearby to feel it. Some shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to wait or move on, while others stopped completely, curiosity taking over their routine. The young woman's chest was tight. She felt the weight of all the fear, desperation, and hope she had carried for months pressing down on her. The small coin she had placed in the case still felt heavy in her pocket, as if it had transferred all her worries into that simple gesture. Then he played. The first note was soft, trembling just slightly, like it was testing the air. The melody was gentle, delicate, and at the same time filled with a quiet strength. It did not rush. It did not shout. It spoke softly to everyone around, reaching into the core of the heart. The young woman held her mother's hand, squeezing it tightly. She wanted to cry, but didn't dare yet, afraid that tears might break the moment before it had a chance to do its work. The mother lifted her head slowly. Her eyes, tired from weeks of pain and sleepless nights, widened slightly. She had not heard music this way in a long time, maybe years. It felt familiar, though she could not immediately place it. The melody seemed to wrap around her, bringing memories she had almost forgotten. The sound was like a gentle hand touching her soul, reminding her of comfort, love, and the days when life had not felt so heavy. People nearby started to take notice. Some stopped walking, unsure why they were being drawn in. Some were children who tilted their heads and listened, sensing beauty without knowing why. Others were older, their eyes catching a memory they hadn't thought of in years. The musician's music was doing what words could not. It was connecting everyone, if only for a brief moment. In a shared sense of emotion and attention, the young woman could not help but watch her mother closely. The lines in her face, once sharp with worry and pain, softened as the notes continued. Her mother's breathing became steadier, more rhythmic, as if each note helped her body remember how to rest. The young woman felt something inside her shift. Fear was still there. Worry still clung to her heart. But for the first time in a long while, a thread of hope had entered their lives. The music was showing her that not everything was lost. The musician played slowly, not forcing the pace, letting each note float and settle. Sometimes he paused slightly between phrases, giving the melody room to breathe. The young woman noticed that the crowd was quiet now, not out of fear or indifference, but because everyone felt the weight of what was happening. Strangers who had walked past only moments ago were now standing still, drawn into the music in a way that made them forget about errands, appointments, and the harshness of the street. Some coins began to appear in the musician's case. People who had been watching tossed them in silently. The young woman did not notice at first, too focused on her mother, too afraid to break the fragile bubble of calm and beauty surrounding them. But gradually, she became aware that something else was happening. This one song meant only for her mother was touching others too. And as it touched them, it reminded them of their own humanity, their own struggles, their own ability to care. The mother's lips trembled slightly. She hummed quietly along with the music, a sound so soft it might have been missed by anyone who was not listening closely. The young woman felt tears sliding down her cheeks and tried to wipe them quickly, embarrassed by her own reaction. She did not understand why a simple song could feel like it was unraveling months of pain and filling it with warmth. It seemed impossible, yet it was happening right before her eyes. The musician's face showed no rush, no expectation. His eyes were half closed as he played, but his fingers moved with purpose, precision, and care. Each note seemed intentional, as if he were telling a story that could not be told in words. The story was one of love, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. The very things the young woman and her mother had known for too long, but never felt recognized. Time passed slowly. It was hard to tell how long they stood there. A few minutes felt like hours, yet also like seconds. The young woman's fear began to melt, replaced by a cautious gratitude. She could not stop staring at her mother, seeing in her face a flicker of the woman she remembered before illness, before worry, before exhaustion had taken so much from her. As the song continued, more people joined the silent audience. A man with a briefcase stopped and rested it on the ground, listening. A woman with groceries in her arms leaned against a wall, her face softened. A child tugged at his mother's hand, pointing quietly, asking for permission to listen. The street became less a place of rush and business and more a place of shared experience. All because of a single melody, the young woman realized she had never felt so exposed and yet so safe at the same time. She had given everything she had just to hear this song. She had risked her pride, her future, even her dignity, and here, in front of strangers, it was worth it. Every fear she had carried seemed smaller now, diminished by the power of music and the humanity it revealed. The musician continued playing, and though the notes were simple, their effect was profound. He did not speak. He did not ask for more than the dollar, and yet his presence, his choice to give this gift, seemed larger than anyone could measure. The young woman felt gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. She wanted to thank him endlessly, but words felt too small, too weak. To carry the weight of what he had done, the mother's eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide, and the young woman felt her own emotions rising again. She realized that the song was not just for her mother. It was for her too. It was for the hope she had almost lost, for the strength she did not know she still had. It was for the reminder that even in the darkest moments, beauty and kindness could appear, sometimes from the most unexpected places. As the final notes drifted into the air, the musician slowly lowered his instrument. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, heavy with emotion, filled with a sense of completion and relief. The young woman stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid that any motion might shatter the fragile perfection of the moment. Then she looked at her mother. Her mother smiled, the kind of small, genuine smile that carries a lifetime of love and endurance. It was enough. It was everything she had hoped for and more. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, the young woman saw her mother relaxed, unburdened, even if only for a moment. That moment was enough to make every sacrifice, every fear, every sleepless night worthwhile. The musician opened his eyes fully and looked at the mother and daughter, nodding slightly as if acknowledging that the gift had reached its mark. He did not speak, but his calm presence said everything. The young woman felt a wave of gratitude wash over her again, so strong it nearly knocked the air out of her. She wanted to kneel and thank him, but something told her that his work was not about thanks. It was about giving. People around them started to move again, but differently now. Some left quietly touched. Some whispered to one another about the beauty they had just witnessed. And some stayed, watching the young woman and her mother, sensing the depth of the moment they had shared. It was not just a song. It was a reminder that even in a world that could feel cold and indifferent, acts of kindness, generosity, and courage could still shine. The young woman knelt down briefly, helping her mother steady herself, and whispered a soft thank you to the musician. Though she knew it was not nearly enough, the musician only smiled slightly, gesturing toward the dollar in his case, and returned to his quiet, unassuming presence. He had given more than music. He had given hope, dignity, and a reminder that even small actions could carry immense meaning. The mother rested her head against her daughter's shoulder, eyes closing for just a moment, savoring the feeling of peace that the music had brought. The young woman held her mother tightly, feeling tears stream down her face. She realized that the song would stay with them far longer than the moment itself. It would linger in memory, in heartbeats, in the quiet spaces of their lives, reminding them that even the smallest gestures, a single dollar, a single song, could change everything. The notes had barely faded into the morning air when the young woman realized the crowd had grown closer. People were murmuring quietly, sharing glances as if they had witnessed something rare and fragile. The mother, still leaning on her daughter, seemed lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted. Her shoulders, which had been tense and rounded from months of struggle, now seemed to carry a hint of strength, a subtle reminder of the woman she had once been. The young woman looked down at her mother and noticed the faintest sparkle in her eyes, something that had not been there in weeks. It was a fragile light, easily extinguished by reality, but it was there. And that spark, she realized, was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear and desperation she had endured. The musician carefully placed his instrument on the case and leaned back slightly. His gaze met hers for a brief moment. In that look, she felt a deep understanding, as if he knew all the pain, all the sacrifices, all the silent battles she had fought. He did not speak, but his eyes told her that she had done the right thing, that asking for help, even in such a desperate way, was not shameful. It was human. A few people began to approach, dropping coins into the case. One man, who had been listening from a distance, handed over a few bills. A woman with a small child left a handful of change, smiling softly as she did. The young woman noticed these gestures and felt her chest tighten. She had not expected this. She had thought that desperation might embarrass her, that pride might be shattered in public. But instead, people were responding with kindness, as if the music had reminded them of something important about themselves. Her mother, still quiet, reached into her coat and tried to offer a small gesture of thanks. A soft touch to the musician's hand as he picked up his instrument again. He did not stop her. He allowed it, accepting the gesture without comment, letting the moment speak for itself. The young woman could see the emotion in her mother's eyes, a mix of gratitude, wonder, and a sense of being seen. Even after months of feeling invisible, the musician started to play again. A new melody that was lighter, almost playful, but still gentle. It was as if he were telling a story, not with words, but with each note that floated into the air. The young woman listened closely, letting the music wash over her. Feeling it weave through the tension that had gripped her for so long, every worry, every fear seemed to pause in the presence of this sound. She held her mother's hand tightly, letting the fingers entwine, feeling the warmth and life in them. The crowd had become still. Passers-by who had initially ignored the scene were now lingering, drawn in by the power of the melody. Children tilted their heads and whispered to their parents, asking questions about the music. Some older listeners had tears glistening in their eyes, though they did not move or speak, captivated by the purity of the moment. The young woman realized that this song, this one simple act, had touched more lives than she could have imagined. It had created a small bubble of humanity in the middle of the busy, different street. She glanced around and noticed a man standing a little apart, quietly observing. He was not dropping coins, not talking, not making any noise. Yet he was watching with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. She could not understand why, but she felt as if he had recognized something in her, something personal and delicate. The young woman returned her focus to her mother, unwilling to let distraction pull her away from the fragile beauty that was unfolding. Her mother closed her eyes, letting the music fill her senses completely. The young woman could feel her breathing change, deepening slightly, becoming steadier. It was the first time in weeks that she had felt her mother's body relax like this. It was as if the music had reached inside, finding the parts of her that pain and worry had tried to bury. The young woman's own heart ached with relief. She had feared so much that this moment would never come, that her mother's suffering would continue without solace. But now there was hope, fragile but undeniable. The musician played each note with care, never rushing, never forcing the melody. There was a rhythm to his playing, a flow that seemed to echo life itself. Some notes were soft, almost whispered, while others rang clear and bright. The young woman felt a deep connection not just to the music but to the man who created it. He had given more than a song. He had given a gift of presence, of attention, of understanding. He had seen their pain and chosen to respond not with judgment, but with generosity. She watched as other members of the crowd began to interact quietly, offering small acts of kindness. A woman handed a bottle of water to her mother, saying softly, "Here for her." Another passerby offered a small bag of food. It was astonishing how quickly compassion had spread. The young woman realized that the music had not just been for her mother. It had been for everyone present, a reminder that even small gestures could create ripple effects far beyond what anyone could predict. The young woman felt her throat tighten again. She wanted to speak, to thank everyone, to express the flood of gratitude and relief she felt. But words failed her. Instead, she just held her mother closer, feeling the warmth and life in her arms. She wanted to memorize this moment, to carry it with her always. She wanted to believe that no matter what struggles remained, there was a power in connection, in giving, in receiving, that could not be destroyed. The musician finished the song, letting the last note linger in the air. It seemed to hang there, suspended, as if waiting for acknowledgement. The young woman nodded to him, her eyes glistening. Her mother opened her eyes slowly and smiled, the kind of smile that seemed to reach through time, touching all the years of effort, love, and care that had gone unnoticed. The young woman felt tears fall freely now, but she welcomed them. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of renewed hope. People around them began to move again, but more slowly, thoughtfully. Some whispered to one another about the beauty they had just witnessed. Some lingered, hesitant to leave, savoring the moment. The young woman realized that this song had created a shared memory, a brief but powerful connection between strangers, a reminder of what humanity could be when touched by kindness. Her mother leaned on her shoulder, closing her eyes again, content and calm. The young woman adjusted her hold, feeling a sense of peace she had not felt in months. She looked at the musician, who was quietly packing up his instrument. He did not rush, did not speak, simply allowed the music to exist, and then quietly let it go. The young woman felt gratitude that words could not fully express. It was more than music. It was a gift of understanding, of empathy, of shared humanity. She noticed the dollars still in the case, the single coin that had made all of this possible. It seemed small now, almost insignificant, yet it had been the key that unlocked this moment. She understood then that sometimes the smallest things, when offered with sincerity and courage, could create the most profound impact. That single coin, given with love and desperation, had sparked a chain of compassion that had touched not just her and her mother, but everyone around them. The young woman felt a renewed sense of determination. She knew the road ahead would still be hard. Bills, illness, and uncertainty had not disappeared. But she had seen that hope could be found in unexpected places, that kindness could arrive in forms she had never anticipated. She felt a quiet strength growing within her, a belief that they could face the challenges ahead together. With resilience and courage, the crowd began to disperse, some offering final smiles, some nodding quietly, all carrying a piece of what they had experienced with them. The young woman held her mother's hand as they started to walk slowly, savoring the afterglow of the music, feeling lighter than they had in weeks. She knew that the song would remain with them, a memory of beauty, hope, and the power of small, heartfelt gestures as they moved down the street. The young woman glanced back at the musician one last time. He was watching them leave, his expression calm but knowing. She wanted to run to him, to thank him properly. But she knew that some gifts were meant to be given quietly, without expectation. The lesson was in the act itself, in the presence, in the understanding that human connection could be more powerful than any coin, any words, any material offering. Her mother squeezed her hand gently, and the young woman felt a surge of emotion. She realized that the most precious moments in life were often the simplest, the ones that reminded you of love, of empathy, of hope. And she understood that even in the hardest times, there were people who could see your pain and respond with something real, something lasting, something that could change a life in ways no one could predict. The young woman and her mother had walked only a few steps when something unexpected happened. People who had been watching the music scene began approaching them again. Some were offering more than coins this time. A man in a worn jacket handed her a small envelope and whispered, "This might help. Take it for her." Another woman pressed a bag of fresh bread into her hands and said softly, "I remember my mother once. Let her have this." The young woman felt tears blur her vision. She had never expected such generosity, and yet it was happening now. Flowing from strangers whose hearts had been touched by a song, the mother looked up at her daughter with a gentle smile, still quiet but more alive than she had been in weeks. The young woman could see relief and hope mingled together on her face. It was a fragile thing, easily broken, but it was real. She realized then that the song had done more than bring comfort. It had reminded everyone present that small acts of kindness could have enormous impact, that noticing another person's struggle could lead to real help. People continued to gather, quietly giving what they could. One man offered to take the mother to a local clinic for a checkup, saying he had connections there. Another offered her small work opportunities, telling her to reach out whenever she needed. The young woman listened to all of this in amazement. She had thought the world had forgotten her, that kindness was rare and fleeting. But in this small corner of the city, humanity showed itself in ways she had almost stopped believing possible. The young woman's heart was full, yet heavy at the same time. She thought about the struggles that still lay ahead. The eviction notice had not disappeared. The medicine bottles at home were still nearly empty. Bills were piling up. She could not ignore the reality, and yet she felt something shift inside her. The song, the musician, and the kindness of strangers had reminded her that she was not completely alone. That hope could be found even in the hardest of times. Her mother squeezed her hand gently, as if understanding the mix of relief and worry that her daughter carried. The young woman looked down at her, seeing her strength beneath the frailty, the love beneath the exhaustion. She felt a profound connection in that moment, a sense that they could face whatever came next together. Strengthened by the small acts of compassion they had received that day, the musician remained nearby, quietly packing his instrument, not seeking attention or praise. The young woman wanted to approach him, to thank him properly, but she understood that his gift had never been about recognition. He had given them a song and a reminder that dignity and hope were more valuable than money, and that generosity did not need grand gestures to make a difference. Even $1 offered sincerely could change the course of someone's life. As the young woman and her mother started to walk again, they noticed a few people from the crowd following quietly, checking to see if they were okay, offering guidance and quietly supporting them. It was humbling and strange to be surrounded by such kindness from people they had never met. Each small act felt like a thread, weaving a safety net that might not solve everything, but would make the hard days easier to bear. The mother's steps were steadier now. She had begun to regain some energy, enough to walk without constant pauses. The young woman felt hope bloom inside her in a way she had not felt for months. The world, which had seemed cold and indifferent, suddenly appeared full of possibilities. The kindness of strangers, inspired by a simple song, had reminded her that people could still care, could still act with empathy, could still choose love over indifference. They reached a small park nearby, where the mother sat down on a bench, grateful for the brief rest. The young woman settled beside her, holding her hand. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the help they had received, but for the reminder that even in hardship, moments of beauty and connection were possible. The song, the musician, and the crowd's generosity had become a memory they would carry forever, a reminder that humanity could shine even in the darkest places. As they sat together, the young woman realized that life would not magically become easy. The bills, the sickness, and the uncertainty would still be there, but she felt a strength she had not had before, a belief that they could endure and even thrive with the support and compassion they had witnessed. It was a quiet strength, born not from certainty, but from the awareness that help could come in unexpected forms, even from people who had never met them before. A few children approached the mother, curious about the woman they had heard about in whispers, the one who had been lifted by music. The mother smiled softly at them, letting them sit nearby, and the young woman felt the warmth of human connection ripple outward. The world could still be cruel, she knew, but it could also be gentle, generous, and unexpectedly kind. The musician remained in the background, quietly observing the small group, letting the moment unfold naturally. He did not interfere, did not offer words of instruction, only presence and understanding. The young woman felt a deep respect for him, not just for his music, but for the way he had chosen to act with humility, empathy, and awareness. The song had been a gift, yes, but the way he gave it, freely and without expectation, had been just as important. Time passed quietly in the park. People came and went, some leaving more assistance behind, some merely observing, but all touched by the ripple effect of that morning's song. The young woman felt a quiet sense of awe at how a single, small act could set off a chain of compassion and generosity. It reminded her that change did not always come through grand gestures or money. Sometimes it came through noticing someone's pain, responding with care, and giving what one could. No matter how small, the mother leaned on her daughter once more, her head resting lightly on her shoulder. The young woman felt the weight of love, responsibility, and gratitude all at once. She knew that the challenges ahead would still be daunting, but she also knew that they had been reminded of a vital truth. They were not alone, and the world, despite its difficulties, still held people capable of unexpected kindness. As the day began to move toward evening, the young woman felt a renewed sense of determination. She would face the difficulties with courage, guided by the memory of the song, the musician's quiet generosity, and the stranger's kindness. She understood that these moments of connection and compassion would sustain her in ways that money and material help could not. They were reminders of what mattered most: love, empathy, and the willingness to act with care. The young woman held her mother's hand as they stood to leave the park, feeling a quiet hope that had not been there before. She realized that life would continue to present challenges, But now she had proof that kindness existed, proof that a small act could spark profound change. She knew that the song would remain with them, not just in memory, but in spirit, a guiding light for the days ahead. They walked slowly, leaving the park behind, carrying with them the invisible threads of hope and generosity that had been woven around them. The young woman understood that their journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face it, bolstered by the reminder that even in the hardest moments, the human heart was capable of extraordinary things. That realization, she knew, was worth more than any coin, any act of desperation, any single plea for help. It was the lesson of the morning of the song, of the quiet generosity that had touched their lives and the lives of everyone who had paused to listen. The young woman and her mother walked slowly down the street, their steps lightened by the kindness and music they had experienced. The mother's breathing was steadier, and her eyes held a brightness that had been absent for weeks. The young woman felt a deep sense of relief and gratitude. She realized that even though life's challenges were still waiting, they had been given something far more important: hope, dignity, and the knowledge that people could care in small but meaningful ways. As they continued, she noticed small gestures from strangers around them. Some were nodding silently, acknowledging the moment they had witnessed. Others whispered softly to one another, sharing the story of the mother and daughter, and the musician who had offered a song for just $1. It was amazing how quickly the story of compassion had spread, how the smallest act had captured the hearts of many. She felt the power of human connection in a way she had never understood before. The mother rested her hand lightly on her daughter's arm, a simple gesture that carried immense weight. The young woman squeezed her mother's hand in return, feeling the warmth, the life, and the quiet strength that had always existed beneath her mother's frail exterior. She understood that while the song had brought them together with strangers, it had also reminded them of each other's importance and love. They were each other's anchor in the storms of life. They stopped at a small corner shop where the young woman bought a few simple groceries, the coin from the musician's case still fresh in her mind. She felt a sense of responsibility, a desire to carry forward the kindness they had received. It was not just about survival. It was about living with care, noticing the people around her, and acting with empathy wherever possible. She realized that the song had done more than heal her mother's spirit, had awakened her own heart. As they walked further, the young woman reflected on how fragile and precious these moments of connection were. The world often felt harsh and uncaring, and yet today had proven otherwise. One small act, a single song, a single dollar, had set off a ripple that touched many lives. Strangers had stepped forward, offering assistance, food, and words of encouragement. The young woman understood that hope did not always come from money or power. It often arrived quietly, through acts of humanity that reminded people of their shared capacity for kindness. The mother looked around, taking in the life of the city with renewed curiosity. She noticed the children playing in a nearby park, the elderly sitting on benches, the street vendors calling out softly. Everything seemed brighter, softer, more alive. She felt a sense of belonging again, something she had lost as illness and worry had consumed her days. The young woman watched her mother's expression and felt a wave of gratitude. The music had done more than entertain. It had restored a sense of life that had been slipping away. The young woman felt a quiet determination rising inside her. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that they were not powerless. The morning had shown her that courage, honesty, and seeking help when necessary could lead to unexpected blessings. She understood that life's hardships were real, but so was the human capacity for empathy, compassion, and change. She promised herself that she would remember this lesson and act on it whenever she could. They walked past the street where the musician had been playing, noticing that he had quietly moved on to a new corner. The young woman felt a deep sense of respect and admiration. He had given without expectation, offering a gift that could not be measured in money. His actions reminded her that sometimes the greatest gifts in life were not material, but emotional, the kind that could inspire hope, courage, and gratitude. She wanted to carry that spirit with her, to act with generosity, and to pass along the kindness that had been shown to them as the day continued. The young woman and her mother returned to their modest home, bringing with them the groceries, the memories of the morning, and the renewed strength that had been sparked by the song. The mother rested comfortably, her breathing calm and steady, while the young woman organized what little they had, grateful for every small blessing. She thought about the people they had encountered, the coins and food offered, and the musician's quiet presence. Each act had been small on its own, but together, they had created a wave of hope that carried them through the morning. The young woman sat with her mother, holding her hand, and reflected on the lessons learned. She realized that life was unpredictable and often difficult, but the bonds of love, the courage to ask for help, and the willingness to offer kindness in return were forces more powerful than fear or scarcity. She understood that even in the darkest times, small gestures could ignite hope, inspire action, and remind people of their shared humanity. Evening settled gently around them, and the young woman looked out the window, watching the city's lights come alive. She thought about the musician and the single dollar that had started everything. It seemed almost magical, how one small coin, given with honesty and hope, could create such profound change. She felt grateful, not just for the practical help they had received, but for the reminder that life could still hold moments of beauty and grace. Even amid struggle, her mother smiled softly, sensing the young woman's thoughts. "Today was different," she said quietly. "It feels lighter somehow." The young woman nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, it does, and it will stay with us. The song, the people, their kindness, it will stay with us." They sat together in the quiet, letting the lessons of the day sink in. The young woman realized that life would not be without hardship, but it was filled with opportunities for connection, understanding, and generosity. The small acts of compassion they had experienced had given them tools to face the future with courage, to believe in the goodness of others, and to act with care in their own lives. The young woman and her mother knew that tomorrow might bring new struggles, but they also knew that they were stronger, not just because of what had been given to them, but because of what they had learned about human kindness. They understood that hope could arise from unexpected places, and that even a single act, a single song, or a single dollar could set in motion a chain of change that touched lives in ways unimaginable. As night fell, they rested quietly, the mother's breathing calm, the daughter's heart filled with gratitude and resolve. The lessons of the day, the power of generosity, the importance of noticing others, and the enduring strength of human connection would remain with them forever. And in that quiet, the young woman understood that while the world could be difficult, it was also capable of extraordinary beauty, compassion, and love, waiting to be discovered in moments small and large alike.